Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're not, digging through mountains of data or complex charts or constantly shifting tax codes. Instead, we're looking at one monumental piece of text. It's literally just one sentence long. Yet, this phrase represents one of the most heavy and gravity-filled financial crossroads any of us will ever face in our lifetimes. Why? Because we're talking about your survival in retirement. We are talking about the profound anxiety of tax uncertainty and the very real possibility of either gaining or losing hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of decades, and it's all based on this one singular decision. So we're going to slow down, take a breath, and completely deconstruct this fundamental retirement question.
Okay, here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll frame the ultimate retirement question. Then, we pit Roth versus traditional. Third, we'll spend some time defining what is better. And finally, deciding for yourself.
All right, Section 1, the ultimate retirement question. Let's frame the dilemma.
Which one is actually better? In the vast, honestly kind of overwhelming landscape of retirement planning, everything eventually boils down to this pivotal inquiry. When we look at our source material, this right here is the core conflict. It is the inescapable dilemma that every single person planning for their future absolutely has to answer. It's not asking which one is more popular. It's not asking which one is newer. It is cutting right through the noise and asking for a definitive ruling on a deeply complex financial reality. Are you betting on a taxable future or a tax-free future? Are you choosing to pay your taxes right now out of your current paycheck using a post-tax strategy? Or are you choosing to defer those taxes using a pre-tax strategy, essentially making a deal with the government to pay them way down the line? The stakes of this dilemma are incredibly high because you're trying to predict the unpredictable. You are trying to guess what tax brackets will look like decades from now, what your own income is going to look like, and how the government will treat your life savings when you finally need to tap into it. The weight of making this choice, it's immense because your future financial security literally hangs in the balance.
Moving right along to Section 2, Roth versus traditional. The two contenders.
What is truly fascinating about this rivalry is just its pure duality. Roth IRA versus traditional IRA. Just look at that word in the middle, versus. Our source text frames this not as some complementary pairing where they work together, but as a direct competition, a battle. It is a zero-sum game of capital allocation. Every single dollar you put into one of these buckets is a dollar denied to the other. You are forced to weigh one directly against the other. This is the classic tension of financial planning distilled into its absolute purest form. It's like two heavyweights standing on opposite sides of a boxing ring, just waiting to be evaluated. You have to commit to a specific tax strategy, and the path you choose will dictate the rules of engagement for your money for the rest of your life.
Let's isolate the first half of this equation, the Roth IRA. This represents one entire philosophy of approaching your future. The fundamental mechanics of the Roth are built on a very specific premise. You pay taxes on the seed today, so you can harvest the crop completely tax-free tomorrow. In practice, this means you contribute money that has already been taxed. You get absolutely no immediate tax break today. You feel the pain of those taxes up front, but the magic happens later. All the growth, all the dividends, all that sweet compound interest that accrues over the decades, it is all yours, free and clear of federal taxes when you withdraw it in retirement. By separating it from its rival, we can see the Roth not just as an account, but as an identity of financial peace of mind. It acts as the ultimate hedge against future tax hikes. It gives you the absolute certainty of knowing that the balance you see in your account is the exact amount of money you actually have to spend.
And this perfectly sets up the contrast, the traditional IRA. The very word traditional carries a weight of history, of standard practice. It's the baseline approach to retirement. And it is the exact opposite of the Roth philosophy. With a traditional IRA, you get a tax break today. The money you contribute is pre-tax, meaning it lowers your taxable income for the current year. You get immediate gratification. You get to keep more of your paycheck right now, and that money goes straight into the account to grow tax-deferred. But here is the catch. The heavy reality of the traditional approach is this. You haven't avoided those taxes, you have merely delayed them. When you reach retirement and finally begin harvesting that crop, every single dollar you pull out is taxed as ordinary income. The government essentially becomes your silent partner in retirement. You are making a massive bet that your tax rate in the future, when you're no longer working, is going to be lower than it is today during your peak earning years. It's a really powerful strategy for sure, but it requires you to carry a lifelong tax liability.
Which brings us to Section 3, defining what is better. Let's analyze this core phrase.
So the absolutely crucial point here is this specific word from our source text, actually. Why didn't the source just ask which one is better? Why throw in the word actually? Well, because this single little adverb changes the entire tone of the sentence. It implies that there are assumptions out there. It suggests that what conventional wisdom might tell you might not be the actual underlying truth. Actually, challenges you. Conventional wisdom, especially if you spend any time on the internet, often screams that the Roth is always better because, let's face it, tax-free growth sounds incredibly appealing. But is it actually better if you're currently a peak earner in a massive tax bracket today and you fully expect to be living very modestly in a much lower bracket in retirement? In that scenario, taking the immediate tax break of the traditional IRA might mathematically put tens of thousands of more dollars in your pocket over your lifetime. Actually demands that you strip away all that marketing noise and surface-level advice to find the deep mathematical and practical truth of the matter. It is a word that demands rigorous honesty.
And that leads us right into better. Let's see how this builds our understanding. Better is, without a doubt, perhaps the most subjective word in the English language. How do we even define better in the context of our source text? Is better purely defined by having the most total wealth mathematically optimized at the very end of your life? Or is better defined by peace of mind today, knowing you've lowered your current tax burden when your expenses, like, say, a mortgage or raising kids, are at their absolute highest? Does better mean having more disposable income right now in your 30s, which the traditional IRA might provide? Or does better mean passing on a completely tax-free inheritance to your children, which is a massive advantage of the Roth? The source text leaves this totally undefined, and it does so deliberately. It forces you to grapple with your own personal definition of what a better financial life looks like. It's a beautifully open-ended challenge disguised as a simple comparative word.
And that perfectly transitions us to our final part. Section 4, deciding for yourself, the subjective nature of the choice. For you, after all the grand philosophical tension, after the clash between Roth and traditional, after the search for what is actually better, the source text pivots sharply and points directly at you. This entire dilemma ultimately hinges on these two profoundly personal words. It tells us that there is no universal answer here. There's no textbook resolution that just blindly applies to the masses. The absolute truth of the text is that the ultimate retirement question can only be resolved through the lens of your own unique, individual life circumstances. I mean, think about the massive difference in context. The mathematical answer for a 25-year-old just starting their career, sitting in one of the lowest tax brackets with 40 years of compounding growth ahead of them, that is radically different than the answer for a 60-year-old executive nearing the finish line in the highest possible tax bracket. For you, insist that context is quite literally everything.
And here we see it all brought back together. The complete source material as a unified, profound statement. Roth IRA versus traditional IRA, which one is actually better for you? Having deconstructed it piece by piece, we can really appreciate the incredible journey this single sentence takes us on. Before we wrap up the philosophy, let's just quickly remind ourselves of the actual financial weights on the scale here. On one side, paying taxes now for a guaranteed tax-free harvest later. On the other side, securing a vital tax break today, but inviting the government to tax your withdrawals in the future. The sentence introduces that conflict. It sets up those two distinct financial rivals. It challenges our assumptions with a search for actual mathematical truth. It questions our personal values with the concept of better. And finally, it drops the ultimate responsibility of the decision squarely into our laps.
So, we end exactly where we began, but hopefully with a much deeper understanding of the weight of these words. Which one is actually better for you? Think about the duality we've discussed today. Think about your own definition of better and your own specific timeline. The source text doesn't provide the answer because, well, the answer doesn't exist on a page. It exists in the specific, unique reality of your financial life. So I'm going to leave you with this. If you had to guess your tax bracket 30 years from now, would you bet the house on it being lower? That is the gamble you take today. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.